Welcome Web3 Media friends to a low sun edition of the location scouting here in the desert. Wanted to talk about vulnerabilities of Bitcoin. It's something that, if you followed the show, I started as a miner. I learned on YouTube of how to set up a miner and all these great things. And wow, the sun really makes my beard look crazy. I look like Father Time. This is really an oversaturation of light onto my beard, giving me a good 50 years of age here. So the vulnerabilities in Bitcoin, as we kind of went through that process, and why I gave up mining, for those who follow the show kind of know, you sort of see it for what it is once you start mining. You're like, okay, there's this, transactional nature that has to deal with, computation of the transaction and recording of this transaction, more so than anything else. But the computation of it, it creates such a raw use of energy. It really is just like driving, being in a city where they're all driving electric cars now, and you see like somebody with one of those crazy Ford F-350s with the smokestack thing, just purposefully destroying the environment. Not just destroying the environment in the way, but just using up a resource like energy that is almost unheard of now, to do is so flagrant in the face of what the world is dealing with, as well as just not as sophisticated, right? We're just talking about just massive use of power, 1 or 2 transactions a day, and you're always online into this pool non-stop, or you're a bad validator, you're a bad node in this network. And so because of that extreme waste, it sort of made me step back and step away. And you see, it's just it's not that white, right? Don't age me. Here it comes again. Father Time's coming in 3, 2, 1, and stop. So the idea of mining Bitcoin to me seemed very wasteful, and I started doing my own due diligence on the coming Ethereum changeover, which finally happened, proof of stake, and just proof of stake in general, and all the other coins that we cover here that were proof of stake, and or just working in other ways to maintain a network. And so, me loving nodes so much, I was like, okay, I went and I got a single purpose computer in order to run specific nodes that are proof of stake, called the Avado. Zero advice there, because that has probably been the biggest loss of my I just haven't been able to recoup any investment there, because of it was a bit of a shock that you could just, I don't know, and that specific hardware wasn't as robust in terms of software development that I had hoped for, nor has it fulfilled its promise of being relevant, staying relevant, by adding new opportunities for holders of that node. That aside, that's like a whole another episode. The vulnerabilities within Bitcoin fundamentally are the hardware. If the hardware is not, if making the hardware is not profitable, if buying the miner is not profitable, you're not gonna buy the hardware, and then they're not gonna sell the hardware, and that begins to say, okay, slows down the accumulation and the growth of nodes and quote-unquote miners, right? And so each of these miners is the node in the world's largest network. The world's largest computer is Bitcoin, and it's spread out everywhere. If one country were to go down, it still can make that transaction and keep that that blockchain alive and a record of it. And so as this is doing this, we're slowing down, growth slowing down, expansion slowing down because it's not as profitable. Then you're left with the existing stock. The existing stock of Bitcoin miners are not nicely made designs. They're not like innovative, they're not secure, they're not like, they're very fragile. And, when I was mining, sometimes I would just go dark for, there might be a little slight spike in power, and I might be out for, one of my boards might, or just literally one, because you have 3 boards on there, typically, and, one of them will just die. And then suddenly you're at 66% capacity, or it just kills the whole system, or maybe it's a power board thing. And so you have 4 boards, very cheaply made, and running at extreme temperatures all the time. So it doesn't take much for these things to break and eventually phase out in terms of I was repairing boards. I was almost going to do an entire channel based on repairing boards of my Bitmain Antminer because it was just getting that bad. Like I was just like having to pop one out, throw in a new one, and look at like, well, what happened to this? And I'm lucky that in Southern California, I actually found a vendor who that's what they did, for a long time. Just kind of on this. It was almost like a side business, really. It was just like kind of work on a couple batches and be like, hey, we got 50 of them. Post online, and then the first 50 would get them and grab them. And so the idea of good hardware comes into question because these things were designed maybe to last 2-3 years, like really, like at those temperatures, at these tolerances, with the components that they're using just the cheapest components possible, so that they can make their profits. And up here, unless you're gonna put this thing completely and submerge it into liquid, maybe that's an option for you. Like, these things are just not made to run for a very long time, and so it's under that pretense of like, oh yeah, I get a miner, and you start calculating out, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna calculate out my profits here because I'm mining this. And as soon as you start taking away electricity, and then as hardware costs are realized over the course of like 5 years, you start to get the full facts of exactly how profitable Bitcoin mining is, and it's not very. And given how prices have dipped, and as well as difficulty is raised, it's not easy to be a Bitcoin miner right now. And so as these sort of nodes fall off and people will stop electing to run these noisy big miners, then you have a real problem of Bitcoin lasting as long as we think it's supposed to last. When you don't have active nodes all over the world, like, constantly, existing, and you have this massive attrition that runs into network timing and the transactions slowing and these sort of things where you're just like, well, is Bitcoin going to make it through the next 20-30 years? A piece of gold that's been around for a long time, and like, you probably can have it for that long. Like, just physically, it's gonna hold up that amount of time. You should probably turn that piece of gold into a Bitcoin miner, and you might have better luck. So, the idea of the Bitcoin network, to me, comes into question as to how robust it can maintain itself over the course of hardware recycle. because you don't have the incentive to keep mining. It's noisy, it's horrible compared to something that's proof of stake, where, you know, if you have, and you can put together 32 Ethereum, you can run a node independent of a pool. We'll have that discussion much later. But, you know, to have your own node, I think is important. It's going to be important, and sort of the ideas of decentralization are starting to really feed into that in a big way for me, just philosophically, that, you know, that's originally kind of, you know, why I was interested in it, but then it's starting to hit home when you have, you know, the FTX scandal and just the ways that, you know, centralized participants are over leveraging even the pools themselves. I'm just like, well, how at risk are we? In which ways do we contribute to these pools? And so, sure, I can have, you know, oh yeah, send me 16 ETH or send me like 4 ETH, and, you know, you'll be included in our pool and you'll get your rewards, and they'll take such a small amount of VIG off the top that it's going to be the same as if you ran with 32 ETH as a single validator node yourself. But what's the trade-off? There's to me now, there's a lot of risk involved. And there always has been, especially for mining. Like, you know, there's all these mining farms that offer, you know, contracts out. You can go onto eBay right now, and go to eBay, and you just type in, like, you know, a Bitcoin contract or Bitcoin mining contract, and you can get a contract, and they'll mine the Bitcoin for you, and they'll send it to you, like, you know, send it to you. Like, it's just like, I met a fellow who's just like trying to get me involved in this. He's like, look, we just buy a miner. We give them all the money for a miner, and we don't have to deal with the noise and the heat, and they'll just put it in the slot. And I'm like, wait, you mean like the black box in Silicon Valley? They'll just gonna like put the black box in the slot for us? And he's like, yeah, you know, I'm gonna make money, and each week they send me the Bitcoin. And I was like, oh, okay, I mean, that's a nice scheme for, you know, someone who's developing hardware, I guess. Hardware solutions. But again, for me, that took away from the idea of decentralization. I'm like, well, what if that entire, you know, quote unquote farm went down? You know, they did something stupid and burned down, or just, you know, these ideas that, you know, the security of the network is at risk when the incentive to participate in the network is low, because these are not made well, and that's not going to last long if there isn't increased incentive for miners, if there isn't better conditions in which the network exists, like physically. Again, the heat and the noise, I'm not kidding you guys. It's like having a hairdryer on, like a really loud hair, like annoying hair dryer too, especially if you clock up your speeds. Like, it's just like, it gets really whiny. It goes, "Arr!" And so, did you hear that? "Arr!" And so, the idea of the Bitcoin network lasting 20 years, 30 years, thank you, shade on this truck, is starting to be it's in question to me now. I'm like, I don't see it. Like, it's like, you know, there's, if the price is, you know, is going to remain low, that's the thing. So it's just like, you know, in a bull market, oh yeah, great, and it's profitable now again, and okay, it's going to be more than it costs for me to plug this in, and as well realize hardware issues over the cost of owning the miner. We'll just say 5 years, because that's, I mean, even if you got it in 2017 and you've been running a miner since, like, you know, the first heyday of Bitcoin in 2017, and you bought a Bitmain, and you bought an Antminer, whatever brand, you plug that thing into a 220 volts system now, which is contemporary, and you've somehow, you know, put it in your basement and it heats your home over the winters, and you've done these amazing things. That was 5 years ago. I can't imagine a miner from 2017 functioning today, honestly, because they do get brittle. The heat starts to affect the components. It starts to affect the wiring. It starts to affect the soldering. I noticed I was having some cold solder issues, because again, these are just very cheaply made, but the heat began to affect like all the elements you would expect. There was rust, in the grating, and so just because the heat and the creating condensation, if it were a bit colder on the outside of that grate, created condensation. So there were all these elements that I could tell from running my miner, which was a used miner, and it already had roughly about a year. I think it was. You have to check those old episodes. Or actually, I didn't even post a lot of those because, like I said, I was going to do a whole channel on repair and looking at repair of these miners, and it's just, it wasn't fun. So it was just like I kept having to do it. I'm like, okay, this is really, and then just deal with it, and then it got running, and then like, oh, I'm annoyed again, like it's running. So it was not a super pleasant experience, super educational. Glad I went through it. Glad I was able to take you guys through some of it. But I just didn't post like all the fixing ones, where it's probably some of my best video work, to be honest, on the channel, because me, I'm very into specificity when it comes to visuals, especially like if I'm working on something. And so I had like a camera that was all into the circuitry. You could see exactly where the burnouts were happening inside the casings, the wire casings. You could see how brittle the cabling was getting, and inside the cable connectors, even were starting to create shorts, because just again, it was always that hot, and it just takes the smallest variance in voltage, smallest variance in whatever in weather around it. So it's just like you had to like create it. I was like, do I have to create a casing around this now? And so because of this variability in its performance and function for the long term, I'm very concerned for the longevity of Bitcoin into the future. And so as much as I love to say like, oh, I just love buying the dips and like having self-custody, putting it on a cold wallet for a rainy day, or financial catastrophe, fingers crossed that doesn't happen tomorrow, because I'm very unprepared for that. But having the idea that like I've been doing that, it sounds nice, but if say like you tuck away that cold wallet for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, is that network going to be around in 25, 20 years even? Because right now we have such great innovation into proof of stake and just sexier networks that make more sense to build on. Clearly, even Doge, like I feel like if somebody could just program on top of Doge, you could have really one heck of a network. My theory is you could put Twitter on Doge, and even just running that create incredible value for holders. And so, but then that you'd be incentivized because everyone would want Doge, and you could work it in somehow to existing on Twitter or any other platform that could be a program for that physical network that incentivizes people to maintain that network. With Bitcoin Maxi, even Sailor, like going like, oh yeah, ETH is way better. You have the vogue. Will the vogue of Bitcoin be gone? Because of, again, how interesting the narrative will be for proof of stake, and again, being able to run a proof of stake node. I could run ostensibly 100 or so, maybe something like 60, I think was the estimate, ETH nodes onto this one fairly discrete device. I won't say it's completely discrete device. It consumes maybe I think 60 watts. watts or something like this. Relative to the 1500 hairdryer of a Bitcoin miner, it's a joy to have around. And like, it makes no noise. It does heat up a little bit, and it runs, and it runs varied tokens on it. So I could do an ETH, I could do an Avalanche, and so you can run both concurrently. And so there's a lot of freedom to that, and it's part of why I think the node narrative is going to take hold soon. And if you're out there in YouTube land, in the comments section down below, or hit me on Twitter at MintyFreshVibe, and let's talk how to manufacture nodes, because I think nodes are just going to really take hold of the imagination. Just the idea that you can purchase a thing. This is why we all fell in love with helium. I mean, if you're rocking a helium miner right now, put in the comment section down below like one of those fist emojis, because I need to feel your power, because I feel you, and I know the hurt that being a helium miner is. And that's kind of part and parcel. I was just like, oh, okay, well, they're programming, they're going to program a wireless network on it. That's genius. You can grow a wireless network faster than and compete with AT&T, decentralized. Brilliant. I'm in. It was a great experiment of decentralization. I just, as I sort of said when I got it, and I sort of, maybe I did an unboxing video and showed you guys, it's who uses it. Like, I don't know anybody who uses the helium network. I think it's so awesome that we're building out this network. I don't know anybody who's like, oh, let me get some bars for that helium network. No, I don't. You have to run an app. You have to know about it. So you have to have marketing. So you can't just compete with AT&T tomorrow, even if you are decentralized. It requires time in order for that network to be known well enough to be used, so that when you have adoption, you have use, you have profitability, perhaps. It's probably going to take me 5 years with my helium miner, but as these networks develop and mature, as these projects mature, then you can have an offering of a product, like, oh hey, like say helium gets to a good point, you can do a proper I mean, there's a ton now of just little small plug-in miners, and I think that there's attraction to that, especially if you can do it in ways, again, that give you a little more flexibility for the super user, but also make it as easy as just plugging in. Like, I can just power this thing, much like a Ring camera has sort of revolutionized the way that we can have cameras everywhere. Plugging in, not thinking about it, is going to be a future. And now, mind you, I also participate in a Bitcoin node, not a miner, but a node, because I have on that Avado. I don't want to call it a computer, but it is. It's just a computer. It's an i7, and they decked it out with specs that are sufficient enough to run a couple of proof of stake networks. So having those allows you to. Sorry, I'm having these real Marco Rubio moments. I need to hydrate. Traffic is just ridiculous right now. And so now my head is in that Marco Rubio moments. The mining, I mean, it's just really bad traffic. I'm trying to read the traffic of how just horrendous this is. While being parched. This is what I keep going for you, the audience, so that we can learn about this stuff and make moves in the space that make sense to our goals as creators and entrepreneurs, in the space of bringing media, bringing our arts to this space. It's tough for me to think about Bitcoin having the longevity that I wanted to have. Like, gosh, this is gonna be great. That was my first thing. I was like, this is gonna replace gold. I don't even carry this stuff around. I have self custody, so I don't need to like go to sort of, you know, and invest in a gold exchange ETF or some like sort of gold, even just the gold company like ABX, just like, holds it for me, and they like manufacture gold, and that's my play. Is I invest in that company, and I hope that they're good at mining and they don't run out of whatever lands they own. So there's, these things where I'm just like, self-custody, amazing. I want that. Bitcoin, that's digital gold. Kind of, that was the thought back then, right? And so, but now it's like, wow, I don't know if I can see this lasting 25, 30, 40. I mean, look how fast we've gone in 2 years, 3 years. Going from, a proof of work to proof of stake. And seeing, some of the great proof of stake projects develop, and soon they're going to be able to market themselves. And soon, this is the thing, Bitcoin has no marketing other than Bitcoin Maxis, which makes it super powerful, as evident by Doge as well. And that's the big lesson that we learned from Doge, was that even as a meme coin, it still gained enough popularity that people paid to mine it. So they paid to buy miners. Dogecoin is proof of work still, and they paid to mine Dogecoin. And so that made it the thing that went to from 0.00001 to, was it 8, 9, 10 cents today. So that astronomical growth is due to the idea of a physical network, and that's powerful. And I think that's why Elon Musk liked it, because you're like, geez, that's a very strong use case to have, a working existing nodes out there in the world. And so if you can run those discreetly on your computer, just like leaving your computer on, or with so much less power now, and then with a lot more marketing dollars behind it, because now that there's programming on it, now that there's layers on top of it, there's businesses that exist on top of these networks that need that network to survive, that pay into that network, is going to create at a certain point, marketing, Paramount or versus HBO versus Sony. So you have these studios, and they're going to want to bring everyone to their network. And as you guys are seeing now, if you go to any of these events, you're like, oh yeah, check us out. Everyone's like trying to, Polygon is doing a really good job. I think that's why Polygon has grown so much. They're so aggressive marketing and reaching out to creators like us, to try to get the next wave of creators and business makers, because that is the thing that's going to, power these next generations of layer 0, layer 1s. And so these ecosystems are going to be forging ahead versus Bitcoin, who only have their maxis, and those maxis only survive if Bitcoin is doing well and well enough, and it's growing fast enough at a pace that makes mining profitable, ahead of its difficulty levels, ahead of its cost of electricity, which has gone up. And so if things are as they're going, electricity is going to be more expensive. Difficulty is still on the rise. I guess there's some sort of mystical halvening that's going to happen, that's going to kick up the difficulty more. Just like it's even more intimidating to mine. You're like, everyone is waiting for the halvening on the holder side, because you're like, wow, that's only going to create half as many more new Bitcoins on a continuing basis that get put into the open market. So that means price goes up. Well, that also means it's really hard to mine if now you only have half of the ability to, profit from mining. And I believe this is August 2023, right? And so, roughly, the concept. Oh, there's a big fire of a truck. That is brilliantly scary, and I'm gonna have to